What kind of side effects did you have? How did your life start?
Yeah. Well, first off, thank you for sharing that. And it's funny how we put this importance on like, I had a
How fitness has saved your life and it's given you this life of joy.
tons of podcasts, and I think like some of the one of the glitches we experienced was the first for both of us. So the opposition is real, but we're gonna get this done.
Can you give them the name of your coaching program? It's an 8-week program, right?
Yeah.
Or do you have
it's,
something new now? It's been a while since we connected.
No, that's it. Yeah, that's so I've got my regular coaching, then I've got a team of coaches here at Key Nutrition, and that's where we do the fitness and nutrition. And I wanted to dive deeper with clients, so I created a course called the Next Level Experience. And this is the 5th cohort. I kind of ran the first one like that.
Hey there, and thanks for tuning in. I have the legendary Brad Jensen here with us. You may know him as the Sober Bodybuilder on IG. He truly lives a lifestyle of health and wellness and shares how you don't need fad diets. You don't need like some quick fix. What you need is accountability, hard work to get real results. I love how he shares his journey and with such authenticity, and so grateful to have you here on the show with us. Thank you, Brad, for being here.
Thank you. It's an honor. I'm stoked to be here.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I'm going to keep it real with y'all. It has been some technical difficulties, and we are bound and determined to share his transformational journey with you. That we had to start over, but we're back. And I think it's because this message really needs to be heard. And so thank you, Brad, for your patience. Thanks for being here on the show. And I want to get right into it because we were recording and we were right into a spot where I was like, oh no, I want to hear this part because your story is incredible. And I so relate to it from every aspect, from your fitness journey and from the addiction. And I was saying how, I was always into fitness. And then when I couldn't do that anymore after my motorcycle accident is when I got in trouble with drinking. And I would love for you to share a little bit how fitness has saved your life and it's given you this life of joy, and where you have successful businesses and programs, and you're really sharing how other people can have a healthy lifestyle as well. So can we go back to when you were little and you first discovered drugs and alcohol, and how you got to where you are and how you got sober and have the life that you have? So thank you again for being here.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's funny. Both of us have done tons of podcasts, and I think like some of the one of the glitches we experienced was the first for both of us. So the opposition is real, but we're gonna get this done. So I'm honored to be here. I've always had the most uppermost respect for you and what you do and your message, and so it's fun to be on here. But yeah, I mean, I'll sum it up a little shorter than I did, but I grew up a little chubby kid, and I kind of had a big chubby phase about 10 to 12 years old. And I was telling you that if I could go back and just give that kid a hug and be like, bud, you're going to hit puberty, you're fine. Like I thought I was the most obese human known to man, but it turns out I was just a chubby 12-year-old, like super normal. I hadn't hit the growth spurt, hadn't hit the puberty, a little too much Nintendo, a little too much junk food. Junk food was my first addiction. I really, like, my mom was like, okay, I think you eat too much. I was like, thanks. uh, and, it was, I was teased by my friends. I wasn't shoved in lockers, but I was always the butt end of the joke, and I laughed it off and tried to pretend like it didn't bother me, but it did. And about 12 or 13 years old, I was offered alcohol for the first time, and I remember thinking, "Oh, I can't do that. That's for adults." And then everyone else was, so of course I did. And I hated the taste. I was like, "That is awful." And about 20 minutes later, I thought, "This is pretty great. I can be me." I
Well,
didn't,
it's just
no
crazy
longer.
that you were 12, 13 years old. And I think that's when that stuff starts to happen. And right at the time around when you're struggling, and I see, my daughter, my youngest daughter is 13. And just when you said 12, 13, I'm like, my gosh, she's at the age where she just went to her first teenage party. And I'm like, wow, that's when it's starting to happen at those years. And I look at her as being so young and innocent. And I'm like, she knows I'm very open with me being sober and the struggles that I had with alcohol. And she saw some of that, unfortunately, too. And so she knows about alcohol, but just to think that she's at the age you were when you were offered your first drink and you didn't like the taste, but you're like, huh, maybe this is the solution. It kind of makes me feel good.
Yeah. It's crazy. I have nieces and nephews that age, and I'm like, oh, they would never do that. And then I'm like, maybe they would because my parents didn't think I was doing it right, and they had no idea. I'd tell them I'm going to sleep at my friend Todd's house, and they were like, "Todd's great." Little they know we're breaking into the parents' liquor cabinet, going to the basement, and so that continued for a while until I picked up a fitness magazine and when I was about 15. And I couldn't tell you why I did it. I was drawn to it. My mom was buying a book in a bookstore. I was joking that people used to go to bookstores, kind of weird. And
Right.
um, and I picked up this magazine. I was enthralled, and I thought I want to look like that guy. And I remember I just started reading, and it was for whatever reason the first time I'd been passionate about probably anything in my whole entire life to that point. I was 15, so and I started applying what these magazines were telling me. I went on these diets and they were probably for like a bikini girl competitor. I don't remember, but I remember it was very low calories. And at
You're like,
16,
yeah,
I was,
I'll do whatever that bikini girl's doing. She's ripped. Let me
yeah,
have some
yeah,
egg whites.
she's ripped. Maybe I'll get her on a date if I keep going on this route. So I, I got a gym membership when I was 16, fell in love. During that time, I also learned that alcohol was bad for building muscle. And I didn't quite know how to interpret that information. Luckily, I interpret it as like, holy crap, if I drink, I'm gonna never build biceps. And so, which isn't the case, right? But it's not advantageous. So I stopped drinking, cold turkey, boom, wasn't gonna do it. Fell in love with the gym. That's what I would do. But I still felt this need to like want to escape. Like I wanted to party, but I just didn't want to drink. And it was my junior year of high school, so I was 17 years old, and I remember it clear as day. Somebody offered me some pain pills, a buddy at a party, and I remember thinking, I literally told him, "Oh, I'm not in pain though." And he laughed at me and he said, "No, no, no. All the buff guys that I looked up to at my gym, they're doing them. That's who I got them from. They'll
Mm.
uh, they'll make you feel like you're drunk, but you don't have a hangover. You go out and the next day you can work out." And I said, "Awesome. Let me take them." And about 30 minutes later, when they hit me, I remember thinking, "This is the feeling I want the rest of my life." I remember where I was, the kitchen, what it looked like. I remember the brown cabinets. I remember everything about that moment because I literally felt in that moment like I had arrived. I was I was getting buff, and I finally found something that I was like, "Whoa, now this is next level." And so I should have caught some warning signs early on because by the time I was a senior, I wasn't doing this like a normal person. Like my buddies would take them on the weekends sometimes, only sometimes. I wanted them all the time. So by the time I was a senior, I found out that you could go to Tijuana, Mexico, go to the pharmacias, and you take off your door panels with some, drill gun. You stuff them full of everything you can in that pharmacia from, all narcotics and steroids. And you put the door panels back on and you drive through the border and they don't stop you. And so I did it not knowing the amount of federal felonies I was committing. I was just kind of idiot savant, young kid. And so that's where my entrepreneurship began, I joke, because I started selling all of these
Well,
pills,
but
but I
isn't
always
that
had something
crazy?
made.
Like you were like, whatever it takes to get the fix that I want, uh, you know,
Yeah.
I'm going to
Yeah.
drive to Mexico. It's like the thinking that we have, like, how can I make this work to get what I need? And yeah, that's a great skill as an entrepreneur for sure. And I love how you in every way can compare your sobriety journey or your addiction and to your entrepreneurial skills. And I have really heard that some of the most successful people in the world are recovering alcoholics and recovering addicts because we have that drive to get whatever it is that we want or need.
Yeah, yeah, that tenacity, like you can't teach. And it was like I was doing it from a young age, not even knowing it. And then, I was selling pills and had like a ledger and like again, I didn't really understand just how like what I was doing could get me in big trouble. You're untouchable and invincible as an 18-year-old kid. Like I didn't, really think it was that big of a deal. And so this continued the later half of my senior year of high school. And what happened was, I mean, during that time too, I remember my parents telling me we got to look at colleges, and I remember thinking, why would I want to go to college? I hate school. Like I hated school. I passed barely, not because I wasn't intelligent, because I just didn't want to be there.
But you're
And
like, I
so
got this business on the side and it's doing pretty well.
they were a little concerned why I had so much cash, but
And I
I
want to
so
ask you something though, like because I got in trouble with alcohol. I took a pill. And this isn't even something that I've talked about a lot, but I got sober. I know you got sober in 2012. I got sober in 2016. This last July, I was, you know, and I could give you all the excuses in the world as alcoholics or addicts can, but for whatever reason, I did not reach out to my sponsor. I wanted that relief. I wanted that escape, and I took a pain pill. Not I live with a lot of pain, but I took it for the wrong reason. And I knew in that moment that I lost my sobriety. And I didn't feel good. I didn't feel high. I didn't feel good. I didn't feel anything but shame and disgust and sadness. And I knew the next morning, and I just went to bed. My healthy fear of ever getting addicted to pills was so much stronger, thank goodness. And I had so much program in me that I woke up the very next morning and went and talked to my sponsor. And I said, I blew it. I screwed up. I took a pill. And I didn't tell my husband, I didn't tell anyone else because I didn't want to hear anybody say, oh, it was just one pill, but you have pain all the time. I knew that I took it for the wrong reason. And I've heard that getting, clean from, sober from alcohol is one thing, and addiction with pills is a whole other thing. And I never want to have to get clean or detox from that. So luckily I knew to go to my sponsor, but I just wondered, like, I think it's so weird how a pill can affect one person in one way and the chemistry of it can affect someone else in a whole other way. And I had said to my sponsor, I was like, wow, I wish it would have made me feel great. Or I wish it would have been like, oh, this is my solution. But I'm thankful that it wasn't. It didn't make me feel good. So I luckily have now been sober and have not taken a pill for that or drink, thankfully. Um, but there's been a lot of shame about it. There's been a lot of sadness. And I just wondered, like, with the pills, you were taking them, they were making you feel good. What kind of side effects did you have? How did your life start crumbling? Did your parents see, other than just you having all this cash, were there other side effects? And I'm asking you this for other parents out there that might think that there's something maybe a little off with their kid, or maybe anybody out there who's wondering, do I really need to take that pill? Maybe this is their wake up call.
mm,
What are some of the side effects that you were experiencing?
yeah. Well, first off, thank you for sharing that. And it's funny how we put this importance on like I had a buddy that had 5 years of sobriety, smoked weed one night, and it was after he was going through a divorce, and he just wanted to escape, and he didn't smoke. He smoked a lot, And he says, I blew it. And it's funny now, that was 5 years ago. The last 5 years, I think his sobriety has been so much stronger. And even though
Mm.
he has 5 years, not 10, I'm like, you've been sober every day but one in 10 years. That's pretty damn good, dude. Like it does. Anyway, so thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
And
I
that's
was
that's
beating
rigorous
myself up
honesty,
pretty bad.
because you could have just said, well, I didn't do anything, right? I mean, gosh, that's where my head would have went. I would have been like, well, you don't have to count that, right? That's where that sick part of my head goes. But the side effects were, what happened was I didn't want to go to college, so I got certified as a personal trainer while still in high school. So I was the youngest personal trainer that Bally Total Fitness, which is since gone out of business, had ever hired, that they were aware of. They were like,
Wow.
you're barely 18, okay. And so I started working there, moved out of my house, moved out of my parents, moved in my own little apartment. What happened during that time was somebody else had gotten busted down there at the border. They got stuck in a Mexican prison. I was terrified. I thought, I'm too pretty to go to prison. I'm not doing this. So I knew,
I'm too pretty to go to prison. I love that.
yeah. And then I ended
You
up with a
are.
lot of jail time. So, and so the the stash I had was going to run out, and I had this just kind of plentiful mix and I'd been doing them daily essentially for 6 or 8 months. I don't remember, and sometimes more than others, but always daily, just a little bit. Sometimes a lot. And my parents knew I partied, but they thought I was just drinking, and I shouldn't say just drinking, but they didn't know that when those pain pills ran out, I thought, okay, it's time for me to grow up, right? It's time for me to grow up. We'll just move on from this. And I had heard about these things called withdrawals, but I didn't really know what they were. Like, I wasn't selling to junkies. I was selling to high school kids that were doing them on weekends. So I didn't see the withdrawals, the pain, the anguish. And when it hit me, I remember that was withdrawals. I was the sickest I'd ever been, not only physically, but the worst panic attacks, emotionally, mentally. I felt like I was in prison. And you know, from a series of a call to a call to a friend, ended up with somebody who had some heroin. And I remember
Oh,
thinking, this is a
I didn't
line in
know
the
that part of
sand.
your story.
Yeah. So I remember thinking, this is a line in the sand I've drawn. Like, I don't, that's gross, right? I came from a middle class, religious family. I wasn't, I, the, heroin was like, oh, that's gross. I
But
don't
you
do
know
that.
what? Addiction doesn't discriminate. I remember
Nope.
thinking, I'm married to a lieutenant commander with the California Highway Patrol. When I told him I had a problem with alcohol, was like, no, 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 no. Wait, I arrest people that are alcoholics. You are not an alcoholic. I'm like, yeah, I am actually. I learned that, you know what? It doesn't matter where you come from, what you look like, how much money you have, what race you
Yep.
are. It doesn't just, addiction does not discriminate. And so,
No, it does not.
no. And so when it came to the heroin, was that like, maybe that's a choice for me?
I initially said no. I ended up at this friend's house who was like, I think I can get you something to help. And I'm thinking like, maybe I don't know, something to taper with, or and his brother showed it. He had the heroin. And I said no at first. And about 10 minutes later, I said, well, it makes me feel better. He said instantly. So I shot up heroin for the first time. That's how I administered it. That's how we had it ready. And I did it. And I remember thinking, well, this guy said to me, and rest in peace, he's not with us anymore because of this disease. He said, sorry, kid, your life's never going to be the same. And I
Oh
remember
my
he was,
God.
it was like, hey, dude, you're fucked. Pardon my language. And because heroin was so cheap, and it was more accessible than Oxycontin. And so it just started down this path. And it was only about 6 months later that I called my parents and told them I had a problem. And my mom, she dropped the phone. She was in such shock. And I said, I need to go to rehab, because by then I'd lost my job. I wasn't gonna be able to pay for my rent in the apartment. Like, I'm 19 years old. So I hit my first treatment center when I'm 19. I'm 2005. And they sent me to this, posh treatment center with this, beautiful mountain view. And I remember thinking, this place is a prison. I would go back there now to just have 30 days to work on myself any day of the week. And I remember thinking in there, I said, cool, you guys are old. And so, yeah, like, I'm an addict, but I'm not an alcoholic. I'm not even legal age to drink. And I haven't drank in a long time. So I'm not going to identify as that. And I say that because I see this a lot in younger people trying to get sober. Um, a drug. And like alcoholism is doesn't matter what type of alcohol, whether that's meth or heroin, it's all the same. And I
It
found out
is
real
all the
quick.
same. And that's why when I took that pill, I was like, oh my God, this is the gateway to who knows what. And if I let myself off the hook for one pill, what else am I going to let myself off the hook for? I have to be brutally honest, and that's the only way I can keep my sobriety. And so, and I see that mistake too, where I mean, and I've made the mistake of going into a recovery, a meeting, and I'm like, I don't hear anything. This is not, why am I here? I'm wasting. And then I'm like, no, look for the similarities, not the differences, because there is a common bond between anyone who is struggling with addiction. We may come from different, backgrounds, but there is that common thread that separates us and connects us when we
Yep.
come together and we share our experience. And so I would love to go to a treatment center and work on myself too, by the way. I never did that, but so
Yep.
were you there for 30 days?
Yeah, I was there for it was a 60-day program. And this is just where I was at the time. I actually snuck out the window at day 58. Keep in mind, this is not, you can just walk out the front door. This was not a lockdown facility. I snuck out with my new girlfriend in there because we were going to be just fine. And and I got drunk the first night and
Mm.
nothing bad happened. So I'm like, I got this. Within a week of drinking every night with this girl, I blacked out for the first time. And that was kind of alarming. And I remember thinking at that time, you might be an alcoholic too. Thinking they were like different things. Like, well, you're either an addict or an alcoholic. They're all the same, right? And this pattern continued. And that was, you know, I would go to rehab and I got out of there and eventually the alcohol led me back to the heroin and then, and I would use anything. I wasn't like particular. I got really into cocaine and heroin for a minute and then drinking to come down. And this pattern continued. My parents would send me to another rehab, and so I'd go to another rehab, and then I would do great while I was there. I'd get out. I would even do good for a minute when I was out, and then eventually I'd always go back. And people, I just wasn't done. I have no other way to explain it other than I wanted the consequences because you see, drugs and alcohol. When I found out they were actually not my problem, they were my solution. I was my problem. That was devastating news. I was like, oh, because that was my solution for so long and it stopped working. The consequences get so grave. And somewhere in 2006, 2007, I got caught up in the system, got arrested by someone like your husband, right? And once that happens for a drug charge and they put you on probation, you do some jail time, and you are not ready to stay clean, it is like the kryptonite for because you just keep going back because I constantly was violating probation because I wouldn't stay clean and they'd give me a chance and then I'd go on the run again and I'd catch a new charge and so I ended up doing had 17 bookings in the local county jail between 2006 and 2012 and ended up doing about total when I added it up about 20 months locked up, a few months here, a few months there. And at the very end of my using, I did almost a whole year in jail in 2011 to the January of 2012. And I remember during that time, I thought, this is it for me. I've never been clean this long. And was mistaking being clean for being sober for being in recovery. You see, I wasn't doing anything different. I was doing the same bullshit behaviors. I was, selling pills in there. We were getting in fights. We were gambling. Like I was doing the same behaviors, but what just not, I wasn't getting loaded. Like even these pills I was selling were like, pills that like sleeping pills. Like I didn't take any. So I'm like, I'm sober. I'm great. And I
Isn't
got
that
out and
crazy how our thinking, like there is a difference between recovery and just, staying clean or whatever. And I want to say, I read one of your posts the other day and it was so inspiring where you had said, I tried at least 50 times to get to get and stay sober before it finally worked. Every attempt taught me something new about myself. So if you've tried 50 times to get the weight off and keep it off, good, because your attempt at 51 might just be your time. Don't quit. And so I appreciate you sharing how many times and how many consequences that you had. What was the biggest change? What finally got you onto this road of real recovery?
That's perfect transition. So I got out of jail after doing a year in January 27th of 2012. And I remember everyone was so hopeful, including myself, right? This was the time my parents were like, oh my gosh, we have our kid back, our son back. You know, I would build up success in these attempts of getting sober. That was the problem. I'd get stuff to lose. I'd get back. I got a, general manager position at a Gold's Gym, like, and then I would crumble everything, right? And then lose everything, then build back up. And this time I got out, my parents thought this is going to be the time. I thought it was going to be the time. And I got out of jail. And instead of going to a meeting or linking up with some people in recovery, I decided it was more pertinent to go hang out with some girls and go to the tanning salon and, make sure I got my hair cut. Like, I'll get to a meeting eventually. I'll do the work. Yeah, yeah. And it was only about 4 days out of jail when the insatious craving came back, and I can't describe it. And if you haven't been afflicted with addiction, it's hard to describe. It's this phenomenon of craving that comes so strong. My palms started to sweat, and I called the dealer, my old dealer, thinking, "There's no way this guy has the same number. So if he doesn't, then cool, I'm not going to use. If he does, we'll see what happens." And he picked up, and I remember he said, "Come meet me." And I was driving down there, and I'd done everything they told me to do, which is play the tape through. And I did. And I was crying driving down to pick up the dope because I knew this time wasn't going to be different. I couldn't fool myself anymore. I knew that once I started, it took a lot for me to stop, almost impossible um, to stop unless somebody stopped me, and that this is going to be really bad. My birthday is January 31st. My parents were so excited for me to show up for my birthday. They had this big party planned because I hadn't showed up in years, or I'd showed up high. And that morning is when I went to pick up the drugs. And I needless to say, I didn't show up to my birthday party. And that stretch, see, my pattern was about 3 or 4 months of absolute destruction. Then the cops, my parents, something would step in and intervene, send me to detox, send me to jail, send me to rehab. Something would happen. And I terminated my probation, so I was no longer on probation. That's why I did so long in jail. I had nothing hanging over my head. My parents at this point, once I started using again, they said, we're done. They had gotten involved in a program called Al-Anon, which is Friends and Family of AA, and they put in boundaries, and they learned how to. They said no, like, until you're sober, you can't come around here. We're not bailing you out anymore, and that was a tough decision for them. They let me fall,
And you know
and
what? That's
I
so important because I really can't stress enough the importance of loved ones going to some, whether it's Al-Anon or something else out there. I mean, the only thing that I know that has worked over and over is Al-Anon. And I have begged my parents to go to Al-Anon because addiction runs in our family. And I'm not sure if you even know this, but my littlest brother is on death row in Texas. It was like
oh
the
wow.
just it got so bad with the drugs and alcohol that that's where he is. And even though he's on death row, I've begged my parents to go to Al-Anon to get some help, just because it helps you set boundaries, it helps you take care of yourself, and it helps you be able to talk to the person that you love, that you see them struggling with this addiction. So good for your parents
No,
for doing that.
I fucking, pardon my language, hated Al-Anon. It ruined my using because my mom was the consummate enabler. She was going to love me to death, literally. I mean, she was, if I needed to be bailed out with money, with this, with that, she was always doing it. And my dad would tell her, don't do that. And they finally both joined Al-Anon. And people ask me, my kid's using, what can I do? And I said, my experience is all I know to share with you. And for me, when my parents found they had been for years trying harder for me to get sober than I ever was, little did I know and believe that they were like, they had to take out a second mortgage on their house to pay for it. When I went to make my financial amends, I had no idea the financial strain after all these 15, $20,000 rehabs I'd put on my parents.
Oh,
And so that year went on and it went. And from that day, I did not draw a sober breath until my sobriety date of November 20th of that year. So that was about 11 months of chaos and destruction. I was homeless the whole year. I had no place to live. I never slept on the streets because I was incredibly resourceful, but I slept in bad places, trap houses, abandoned trailers with all these junkies. It was really gnarly. And towards the end of that year, I remember thinking at that point, I just given up. I'd given up. I'd lost all my weight. I looked like a junkie because I would go on these phases and I would still work out a little during them until the very end. And then I didn't work out anymore. And then when I get sober, I do it again. So I never really looked the part. I didn't look like a junkie. That year, when you don't have a house, you don't really have a gym membership either. And everything just went, I just gave up. I said, you know what? I'm a junkie. This is what I'm destined to be. And that's what I did. And it was really gross and really gnarly. And I saw some gnarly shit that I never thought would happen. And during that year, got also strung out on methamphetamines. It was just a bad scene, and it was a dark time. And it got to the very end of that year, and it was my mother had called me, let me know my grandpa had passed away, and this is like November 15th or something. So I remember I was sad, and she said, I really think it's important you go to the funeral. And I said, me too. And she said, Brad, just do whatever you got to do to be right. And she knew what that meant. I would do, please don't be so high that you're drooling on yourself. And please don't be what we call dope sick in withdrawals, which is just gnarly. And of course, I couldn't manage the amount I had until then. And so I woke up that morning and I was what they call dope sick. I was sick. And this is how I lived that whole year. I would be sick in the morning. I'd have to hustle and commit crimes and do whatever to get money to then get well, to just feel normal. And then I would just do this pattern every day. It was like Groundhog's Day. And she picked me up. Um, and I knew I was going to be sick, but I thought maybe I can just plow through it because there was a moral code in me just a little bit to show up for my grandpa. She picked me up and I started vomiting in her car and I was shaking and shivering and sweating. And she said, you can't go up like this. And she's crying. She said, what do we need to do? And I looked at her and I said, can you drive by this house? And she was like, God damn you. She was like, all right. So we get to the dealers. Added insult to injury, I make my mom give me $20 because I'm broke to go get the drugs. So not only my mom taking me there, now I kind of conned her into give me the money. We're so late at this point by backtracking that she says, get in the back seat, do whatever you had to do. And my mom knew I was a heroin addict, but she never watched me do drugs.
wow.
And no parent ever should have to. And I get in the back seat of her car on the highway, and I pull out my spoon and my syringe and the lighter, the little junkie kit, and I start cooking up the heroin to shoot it up. And I'm trying to find a vein, and all of them are collapsed, and there's blood going on her seat. It was just a gnarly scene. And I remember I just kept looking up at the rearview mirror, and every time I looked up, she's sobbing, like tears just coming down her face. But she's stoically she's not even wiping them off. She's not yupping. It's just a waterfall of tears. And she's just looking in the rearview mirror and her eyes are piercing at me.
This
And
is
I remember
just
I do
just breaks
every
my heart
time
as a mom.
yeah. Oh, and now that I'm a dad, I'm like, man, it hits me especially hard. And so I do it. And immediately, of course, I feel better. But I remember it it didn't work at all to block the shame I was feeling. And
Mm.
I looked at her and she looked at me and she just shook her head and she didn't say a word the whole ride. And I remember in that moment, I thought, you got two choices, man. You either need to kill. And I actually, by the grace of God, was not suicidal. I wanted to kill myself when I was sick, and then I would get well from the heroin and feel better. And I was like, that was a little exaggerated. But in that moment, I was under the influence, and I was like, I got to kill myself. Either kill myself or get sober finally. I can't keep doing this. Going on another day was not an option. And that night, I was arrested by the by some cops in a stolen car that, to this day, did not know was stolen. The guy asked me to drive, couldn't remember his name. He wanted me to drive because it was a stolen car. And we were pulled over, and I remember him telling me this car's stolen. That's why we got pulled over. And I remember it was this moment of surrender. I saw the lights behind me. And I just took this deep breath, and the cop came up and said, "You know, I pulled you over." I said, "Yeah, it turns out I guess this car is stolen. I don't have a license. And I probably need to go to jail." And he was like, "Yeah, you do. Let's go." So I went to jail, and that's when it turned for me. It was the gift of desperation to do something different. I went to jail, and I didn't even call my mom to try to bail me out. I didn't call anyone. I just sat there and thought, this is God doing for me what I can do for myself, because I had started praying about 3 weeks prior to this about, please help me stop. I don't know if somebody's out there, anything's out there, help me. I This can't just be my life. Like, I can't keep going like this. And so I only did 30 days in jail. The charges were dropped. And that was another. I just was like, okay, I'm going to be here a long time. I don't know. And when I got out, it was 4 days before Christmas and it was snowing. And I asked my mother to come pick me up. And she said, I will, but you can't come stay here. So she took me to a recovery meeting, dropped me off. I went to that recovery meeting. Everyone left but one guy. And he looked at me and said, do you need a ride? And I said, I sure do. And he said, awesome. Where do you live? And I said, that's the problem. I don't have anywhere to go.
Wow.
I remember this guy kind of took a deep breath and he said, all right, I'll let you stay on my couch for a couple of days, but don't steal anything from me. I said, fair enough. So this guy let me stay on my couch. The next day, he sent me out to go get a job waiting tables. He said, you got to go do something, man. And so that guy let me stay with him for about a week or two. I started waiting tables to get a few dollars cash. And then I moved into a room to rent. And I was humbled by this point. I had to take the bus everywhere. I had nothing. I had a garbage sack full of clothes. I had a 505 credit score. I had no license, no car, nothing. Was in debt, God knows how much. And and that's where my journey started. And I'm so grateful it started from nothing. And it just slowly built up. And within 4 months, I was back in the fitness industry. I got an opportunity at this nutrition coaching company and went and worked for them. They knew my background. And I went to a ton of recovery meetings. I did everything they told me to do, and it finally worked. Like, go figure.
Wow. Oh my goodness. And now, was it a long process? Has your mom completely forgiven you? Has it been a long process of building your relationship with her and your family, and making those amends financially and in
Yeah.
every way?
They were really jaded by this point, and rightfully so. I'd stolen tons of money. I'd forged a bunch of checks. I wreaked havoc on the addict is just a tornado going through people's lives, and they're in the middle, like, what's everyone's problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so they put in some good boundaries. They would talk to me. My mom would talk a little more, my dad, but on the phone. And they said, you got to get like 6 or 9 months before you can like really start coming around here. We just need to trust you. And it was lonely and it sucked, but that's been the biggest gift in my recovery is the relationship I have with my family. There's great mutual respect. And I'll never forget, I think it was my year birthday celebration, and of course it was this big party because because I needed a lot of validation, and people were just like, dude, this dude would never get it. So I had a year, and I'll never forget, my dad looked at me and said, hey, I'm proud of you. And
Wow.
I don't think I'd ever heard that from him. And I think still to this day, even with success I've created materialistically, whatever, I think he's probably said it 4 or 5 times. So when he says it, he really means it. And it was really gratifying. And it was kind of that about it a year, stuff really started to change the dynamic and with me and my family. And I'm forever grateful for that. Like, just no matter how far down the like barrel you've gone, like, I never thought like, oh, like this is happening for me, not just to me. And like, I need to go through this because one day I'm going to be able to write a book about this, and I'm going to be able to use this to impact others. I didn't think any of that. Um, and I wasn't a grateful alcoholic. I heard people say that, and I'm like, no, I'm pissed. I'm 30 years old, and I'm just barely getting my life back a year. I got buddies that are making, $1 million a year and 500 grand a year. And my buddy Jimmy Rex, who you've had on the show, he saw me through it all. He bailed
He
me out of
did,
jail.
because y'all
Yeah.
are both in Utah.
Yeah, he's one of
I
my
didn't
one of my best
realize
friends.
that. I didn't know that you guys were buddies and that he had seen you through all of that. Yeah, Jimmy Rex, he was on the show. I don't know what episode, but he is,
Couple months ago, yeah.
yeah, he's incredible.
Yeah, he
Um,
bailed me out of jail because he was just a good, innocent little guy. He didn't party, and of course I ran from the bail, so he was on the hook. The bounty hunters were after me, and so, but it was guys like him that I linked back up with after about a year, and just started. I knew it was so important to surround myself with the right people in recovery, but also people in life that were doing big things, and he's been a great kind of silent mentor in business, and but it's people like that I just something clicked where I'm like, you are the sum of the I hear Tony Robbins, all these people talk about like you are the average of the five people you hang out with. And I thought, I'm gonna start hanging out with better people then. And that's what I did. And I am so grateful that I finally like people ask me, how'd you get sober? And I'm like, I really fucked up my life and like got to a place where it was like kill myself or get sober. And they're always bummed when I tell them like I did it through the 12 steps. And I'm not saying that's the only way that worked, but I needed to get a connection with God. And that has been, one of the saving graces throughout the last 9 years of my life is this connection I've made with a power greater than myself. And so I'm really grateful for that.
so yes, I think for me too, I hear you on that. What are some things that you do to stay sober? And now, with all the success that you've created, to when you feel like, oh my gosh, I don't know about you, but being an entrepreneur, sometimes I'm just like, oh my gosh, I've got so much on my plate. I put that all that stuff on my plate, but I just need a little relief. I need a reprieve. I need to. What do you do now to stay sober, but to also keep your peace and your serenity?
Gosh, it's so true. Entrepreneurship is taught me so much as I've gotten into this, and it I've often thought like I'm part of these masterminds, and they all go out and have some drinks after, and they're like, gosh, that was a stressful day of learning, huh? And I'm like, yeah, I want that escape. I don't get it, right? But it's funny, the gym has been a big part, and it was interesting. I've always been into the gym and off the gym, but before I would put all the importance in making sure like that I was the most jacked back when I was these attempts to get sober and not. This time, it's funny. I just approached it different. Like I wanted to go to the gym, but I knew that this guy was letting me stay on my couch, and I needed to get a few bucks to move out of there. So I didn't even get a gym membership. I didn't work out for the first month or two out of jail because I needed to get my life right. And then I finally started to get that things, and I went back to the gym. And the gym is a great escape for me. I always say it's not therapy, but it is damn therapeutic, right? And so when I started viewing the gym as overall health, like not just can I be the most jacked guy in the room, the game started to change. I still do a lot of the same things I do when I got sober to stay sober. Um, I help other men now, for free, like someone did for me to go through the steps. I still attend meetings, not as much as I used to, and I still pray morning and night, and that seems to give me like this reprieve that in these moments of distress. But I've been really big on meditation and breath work lately, and just continuing to try to evolve that way. And I will say this, that it wasn't that long ago that I was in Mexico. I think this was July. I think it was July or August, very recently, and I had the pandemic was a perfect excuse for me to be like, I don't like these online meetings, so I'm not going to really go to meetings. And I was like, yeah, I'm almost 9 years sober. I probably don't need to. But what happened was that spiraled into, well, I probably don't need to pray. I didn't think that, but I just stopped doing it. I stopped seeing how I could help others, and I was like, I'm just going to grind on my business. And I got really self-centered on making sure my business was thriving. And I ended up in Mexico in a pharmacy, and the thought crossed my mind that it'd be a great idea to buy 60 Xanax bars because you could buy them, and I saw them, and the girl I'm dating, thank God that she stopped me, and I mean, this was we got back to the place, and and it was a fight. She said, I don't think you should have those. And I'm like, you don't know what's best for me. And she said, why did you buy Xanax? You shouldn't be having those. And I remember I got so mad, and it was all the same behaviors, and it was this fight and argument and struggle. And finally I gave them to her after a lot of uh, resistance, and just cried because had she not been there, I was planning to snort those up my nose. And it was like, that's been eight and a
Oh,
half years. And that sucks to admit. And had she not been there, I would have taken them. I was pissed that she kind of kept following me around when we got back to the hotel room. I wanted to go in that's, and it hit suddenly, and I had this breakdown, and so I've really doubled back down on a lot of the stuff that got me sober. And I just realized at that point, wow, like this is so fragile. And I don't know, maybe it would have been one day like yours, and I would have been like, hey, got to call my sponsor, get right, get honest, or it could have gone for months. I don't know. But
Yeah, but the
today I have
scary thing
so
is,
much to lose.
oh, I know. I thought and the thing is, a lot of times when people have not been an addict or alcoholic, they don't understand. And, I've got friends that are like, oh, or family members, oh, just have one drink. I'm like, no, you don't understand. One
Mm,
drink and I lose it all. That could send
yeah,
me down a road where I destroy my relationships, I lose my career again, and it's not worth that risk for me. And so I'm so glad that you have realized, oh gosh, the importance of prayer and meditation and breath work and getting to meetings, because there's a like that fear of losing it all. And the thing that scares me the most is the relationships that I've worked so hard to, repair, like the relationship with my oldest daughter, who is now going to Yale. She's studying to be a
Yale, huh?
doctor. Yeah, she's in freaking
That's amazing.
Yale. And, relationships with family members. And I have worked so hard for them to trust me, and I don't want to ruin that. And so I appreciate you
That, you know, what's
sharing
funny?
that.
That's the first thing that came to my mind, afterwards. And I cried because I knew just how close I was to, potentially blowing it all, and not just a day, but it's that, I've seen people with 9, 10 years sobriety who have built up massively successful lives and businesses, and they decide to go pick up again whatever form of drugs or alcohol that is. And some of them, their businesses still flourished, everything still went well, but they ruined every relationship their life. They were spiritually dead. They were absolutely miserable. And I'm too terrified for that to be me. Like, I'm terrified to ruin all these relationships that I built. And now being a dad, like, I won't show up for that kid if I'm loaded. It takes over, right? I'll try to show up, but I wouldn't. And so it's been amazing. And I'll tell you what, the parallels I've been able to draw in business and the way my coaching has gone, where, people come in, and I don't take a ton of new clients anymore, but when they do, I say, hey, listen, this is a four-legged chair of fitness. And if you want a coach who's just going to do your macro, your nutrition, and your training, probably go find somebody else who's a little cheaper, because I'm going to talk about, I view this as the four-legged chair of emotional health, physical health, spiritual health, and mental health. They think they're coming for me just for the physical, but I tell them, what happens if you're sitting on that chair and the other three legs get really wobbly, or two get super wobbly? What happens? It puts too much pressure on that physical. The physical starts to go. Before you know it, you're doing a balancing act that's never going to serve you. So I do make them, I say, okay, well, what are we going to do for your emotional health this week? Like, gratitude journaling, reaching out to others. And so I'm so grateful for everything I went through. And because it's also helped me in entrepreneurship, as we alluded to earlier, just remembering that, like, tenacity and the grit and grace. And that's why I love your podcast, is that's where I framed up like my whole. And how I found you was I actually found this cool little hat to wear on Instagram filter that said true grit and grace.
Oh,
And that was yours. And it was funny. My buddy Craig Smith said, I know her. And I think, and I said, oh, okay. So I started following you, and then I don't know how we ended up linking up together, but I've always just thought of that. Okay. The grit is like that tenacity that I've showed. I did whatever I had to do to stay loaded. And so it's like, okay, but I was all grit. And that's why I have grit on my knuckles. And then I
no,
ended up
let
getting
me see
grace.
that. No way. I did not know that.
Yeah. So the E is over here, but I had grit forever on my knuckles. And I was like, I'm the grittiest person I know. This is why I'm going to be successful.
Oh,
And then
wait,
it
I
hit
got
me
to
a
see
couple
those
years.
knuckles again. Wow. I would like to say that you had that done just for the True Grit and Grace podcast.
You can't see the E is the problem, but and
I
so that's why I was like
love
grit
that.
and grace. I
That
but
is,
I got
I
grace
need to
on my
get
other
tatted
knuckles.
up.
Yeah, you do. The knuckles are hard to stick. I'll warn you, but it was a couple years ago that I realized, for me to not only be successful but truly be happy, I had to start deploying more grace to myself. I could give other people grace, but not
Mm-hmm.
myself. No, no, no. You've wasted too much time, Brad. You get to fucking work. You've wasted too much time. Nope. You don't. Oh, sleep. Who needs that? I know it's important for health and you preach it to your clients, but you need to grind and grind and grind and grind and grind and grind. And that's what I did. And ultimately, ruined some relationships along the way, even in sobriety, because business was number one. And that's all I was going to do. And a couple of years ago, when I started really feeling like, dude, give yourself some grace. It's okay just to take a day off. It's okay to chill out. It's okay to not press so hard out of fear that, like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, what if they find out who I am? I'm not supposed to have this. Like, I'm a convicted felon. Like, I'm not supposed to have that much money in my bank account, or I'm not supposed to have, like, there was all these, self-limiting beliefs. And I started just giving myself more grace. And and I'll be honest, it was after I started following you. I'm like, maybe I should get grace on the other ones to remind myself that it's that perfect combination of being gritty as shit and then just enough grace that if I'm not perfect, to be okay with it. And it's been absolutely crucial. And that's how I coach too. I tell people, okay, this is a week where I'm going to challenge you to get gritty. And then other weeks, I'm like, yo, give yourself some goddamn grace. Like, you're not perfect. It's okay. It's 1 week. Great results aren't defined on 1 week or one bad week or one salad or one donut. So stop. And it's been a beautiful thing. So I thank you for that.
Oh, I love that. And I also love the analogy of just, I'm a very, very visual person when it comes to learning, and with the chair, like the four legs of the chair. So if you're feeling a little wobbly, what do you need to work on? Whether it's your physical, your mental, your emotional, or you said spiritual,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
it's all those
And I tell
things.
people the spiritual is different than religion. You can be part of your religion and feel spiritual. That's great, but just make sure you're nourishing your spirit. And that's always a tough one with, especially my guy clients. They get really ego. And I'm like, no, man. I'm like, what makes your spirit come alive? And they're like, well, I like going on like walks in nature. And they like whisper it like it's embarrassing. I'm like, no, that's great, man. And so it's been amazing. I'm really, really grateful for everything I went through. I'm grateful that I fucked up my whole entire life because now I get to use that as leverage experience. I'm gonna be writing a book soon. And like these are amazing fun things that I'm I would not change a second of what I've been through. And 4 or 5 years ago, if you would ask me, do you regret what you went through? I would say, hell yeah. I've paid $50,000 clearing up my debt and my credit from going from a 505 to like a really good, credit standing. But that didn't just come by accident. I had to pay tons of money to. Turns out when you take a payday loan out for $200 and then you don't pay it, it turns into like 2,800 or 3 grand real quick. And
Wow.
there was all these things, right? And so I wasn't grateful. And when you make it through the mud and you start seeing how your experience can benefit others, man, I'm just like, I wouldn't change a thing. Wouldn't
Well,
change a thing about
now
getting
you have
started at
a,
30.
I mean, you have this successful business, and you have coaching programs where you share on a heart to heart, but at very experiential level, on how others too can really make the most out of their life and thrive in not just their health, but in their business as well. Can you give them the name of your coaching program? It's an 8-week program, right?
Yeah,
Or do you
yeah,
have
it's
something new now? It's
no,
been a while
no,
since we
no, no.
connected.
That's it. Yeah, that's. So I've got my regular coaching, then I've got a team of coaches here at Key Nutrition, and that's where we do the fitness and nutrition and I wanted to dive deeper with clients, so I created a course called the Next Level Experience, and this is the fifth cohort. I kind of ran the first one, like let's see how this goes, but it's going to it was 8 weeks, it's going to be 10 weeks now. Same amount of content. We were just cramming too much in, and it's basically a lot of the principles I've learned along recovery because people just tell me, well, how did you change your life? And I'm like, well, there's a few things I did. And so we took some of the principles of the 12 steps and obviously reworded them and formatted them, but just about getting, we have we have the health and fitness week is kind of number one, and you get coaching throughout the whole thing with my assistant coaches. And then we've got an emotional level where I've got, partners that come in that do, energy work. And I thought it was super woo woo till I was open minded enough to try it. And I definitely experienced a change. And so she does some energy work throughout the whole thing. And we've got a mental week where we go over all the neuroscience of the brain and just how to kind of rewire some of that programming. And we've got a spiritual week, a relational week, an abundance week, a business week. And it's been really cool to watch people change in that intimate setting. We only take 12 to 15 people. So the next one launches in January. I don't know when this episode will air, but it's
How many do you have a year? Do you
myNextLevelExperience.com.
have a couple of them a year, or do you have more
We
than
run
that?
one a quarter. So we run
Oh,
one, and
okay.
it's very intense. And then there's a 6-month mentorship for a much cheaper buying afterwards. That's a continuation, but it's been what people really cool to watch people truly just level up. I mean, no pun intended, but just to finally break through of those self-limiting beliefs and get right with themselves and get right with God, whoever God is to them, and watch their businesses soar and their relationships. And it's been a really cool, gratifying thing. So it's hard to even explain what happens in there, but it's an intimate, intense, and interactive, 10-week deal that we really dive deep into all these areas. And there's highs and lows for people, but it's been really gratifying. So yeah, more information on that. Thank you for letting me talk about
Yeah.
that,
Well,
because that
tell
is kind of my
people
new
where they can
passion.
find you. Tell people where they can find you. I want people to be able to do this.
Yeah. The where I'm most active is on Instagram at the Sober Bodybuilder. There's a link in there, but a website for nutrition coaching is keynutrition.com, and the website for my next level experience coaching program, which is a much deeper dive into the emotional, mental, spiritual side and relationship side, is called mynextlevelexperience.com. So,
Oh, well, I
and there's a
love that.
waiting list if you want to hit on the waiting list. All that waiting list does is just give you first priority for when we do launch. You'll get all the information first, and get a chance to do a discovery call to see if it's the right fit for you. So yeah, it's been really cool. And as you know, with entrepreneurs, it's just fun to keep kind of building on new things. And I got some other things in the works, but you know how it goes. Sometimes I'm like, okay, settle down. You don't need 50 new
I
things.
know, but it's exciting, and I love seeing all that you're doing. And y'all, seriously, whether you are, I mean, I think you should check his program out. But if you head over to his Instagram at the Sober Bodybuilder on IG, oh my gosh, your every single post that you do either has me cracking up laughing or I actually learned something from it. But every single one has
Oh, thank you.
such value. I love what you share. And that's one of the reasons I was like, I cannot wait to talk on the podcast with you. And so I thank you so much for, with all the technical difficulties, we made this work, and keep me posted to all the new things that you're doing. And I just really admire your authenticity, how much you share your vulnerability, and you paving the way for so many other people to change their life and achieve success. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Feel the exact same way about you. And I think that's why we've always had a good connection, is the feeling is completely like you are completely raw and real and transparent, and with all your highs and lows. And that's why I love to connect with people like you. So thank you.
Oh my gosh, you're my brother from another mother, I swear. Yes. And next time I'm in Utah, we have to get together. But yeah, thank you for being on. Y'all go check him out. Check out his program coming up. And he has them every quarter. So you might be hearing this in January. So check it out and get on the wait list so you can make sure you sign up for his next one. And make sure you're subscribed to the True Grit and Grace podcast so you don't miss the next episode. And thank you again for being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.